Hi, now that we have already downloaded both Intel's and AMD's manuals, I want to discuss how to use the manuals. I first want to say a comment or two about the differences between the manuals. You might be wondering why take many manuals if I can take only one. Which one is the best? Or maybe some other question. Well, AMD and Intel are two different companies. Both of them create processors for the x86 architecture. For the most part, they agree on most of the architecture parts and on most of the instructions. But sometimes you will find an instruction that is only working on an AMD processor, or maybe an instruction that only works on an Intel processor. And you will also find some other small differences. For the most part, AMD and Intel agree on most of the things. And everything that we have learned so far applies to both of the platforms. It applies both to Intel and both to AMD. But if you are going to use something which is very cutting edge, you have to be careful. Always double check yourself. Check if it works both on an Intel processor and both on an AMD processor. Now that we have said that, let's begin with the Intel manual. We open it with Adobe Acrobat Reader. As you can see in the bookmarks, this manual contains a few volumes. Every volume is some kind of a book of its own. Just as an example, if we click on one of those volumes, we can see that it has its own table of contents. If I pick volume number 2, it also has its own table of contents. Those are just a few different books glued together into one file, one PDF file. Let's discuss the different volumes. The first one, volume number 1, also called Basic Architecture, contains mostly basic explanations about writing assembly code. Some of the information here might be a bit hard for a beginner to read, but basically you should find here everything that we have learned in this course, in one way or another. I pressed this volume, and now I want to take a look at the table of contents. We can see that in the beginning there is some kind of discussion about the different architectures. Mostly I'm not really interested in the first chapter. In my opinion, it begins to be interesting from chapter number 3, which is called Basic Execution Environment. This chapter explains basically how to program using the assembly language. It discusses the really basic concepts, the general purpose instructions and the registers. As an example, we can take a look here at this chapter called General Purpose Registers. If we click on this line, we get to the correct chapter. And we can see this picture which we already know about of the General Purpose Registers. If we continue only a bit, we will also find a picture of the flags register, a very detailed picture of the flags register. There is really a lot of information inside this volume. If you ever want to know something in a more detailed fashion, this chapter would be a good idea. Next, I want to move on to volume number 2. Volume number 2 is the place where I spend most of my time as assembly programmer. It might be also true for you, maybe in the future. Volume number 2 contains the instruction set reference, and it says here A to Z. This is like some kind of a dictionary for all the instructions, all the possible instructions in the x86 architecture, at least for Intel processors. If we click on this volume, we get here, and we can see the table of contents for this volume. This volume begins with a description of how the instructions are formatted, or maybe in other words, encoded. There are explanations here about how assemblers should be written, how assemblers should convert textual representation of instructions into the numerical representation or opcode. This is a very detailed chapter. Next, in chapter number 3, if we move on a little, we get to the actual list of all the instructions. Here we have some kind of a very detailed dictionary, which contains explanation for any instruction which is supported by the processor. Usually, I prefer to use the bookmarks, mostly because the bookmarks are on a side pane, which is always there. So I don't have to go back and forth between the table of contents and the actual pages that I want to see. If you click here on the plus, you can see here chapter number 3 and chapter number 4, which contain instructions from A to M, and 4 contains from N to Z. Let's open, for example, A to M. We can see here a list of the instructions. If we click on an instruction, we will get its description here. As this is a digital document, you can also search inside this document. In fact, sometimes it is a good option to search. In many times, however, you should just get here and find the instruction that you want in an alphabetical way, just like you look for it in a dictionary. That is because many instructions that you will search will show up in the document in many different places, and sometimes those will be the wrong places for you. As an example, if I want to find the add instruction, I can just search for add, and as you can see, I get some really strange results. This is the first result that I got. This is not what I really want. If I get to the next result, I get here, which is not what I want. One good way to refine your search is to make sure that you search only for whole words. Your PDF reader probably has this option, so make sure to use it if you want to find a specific instruction. Now that I search for whole words, I will get better results. But still, it is very hard to get to the add instruction just by searching for add. And in this case, it will be probably better to just search here. in the table of contents, or maybe in the bookmarks.